Before stealth, before fly-by-wire, before missiles could think for themselves, there was a generation of fighter jets that changed aerial warfare forever. These weren't just planes, they were the first true supersonic killers. Built for speed, built for destruction, built for the Cold War. Today, we're going through every single third-generation fighter jet ever made, from East to West, NATO to Soviet, and everything in between. Strap in, because this is going to be one hell of a ride. F-4 Phantom II. The F-4 Phantom II is one of the most iconic warplanes ever built, period. Developed by McDonnell Douglas in the late 1950s, this twin-engine beast could hit Mach 2.2 and carry more bombs than a World War II-era heavy bomber. It served all three major U.S. military branches and was exported to over a dozen nations worldwide. More than 5,000 were built, and that number alone tells you everything you need to know about how dominant this jet truly was. F-5 Freedom Fighter/Tiger II. The F-5 was America's answer to one simple question: what if you could build a supersonic fighter that allied nations could actually afford? Northrop delivered exactly that. Lightweight, reliable, and easy to maintain, the F-5A Freedom Fighter and its improved variant, the F-5E Tiger II, were exported to dozens of countries across the globe. It wasn't built to win dogfights against the best Soviet jets. It was built to be everywhere, and it was. F-111 Aardvark. The F-111 Aardvark was a jet so advanced that it spent years fighting its own reputation before the world finally admitted it was brilliant. Built by General Dynamics with a variable sweep wing, it could fly fast and low, punching through enemy defenses under the radar in all weather conditions. Early service was rough, but once the problems were ironed out, the Aardvark became one of the most lethal precision strike aircraft of the Cold War. Its 1986 raid on Libya proved once and for all that this jet meant business. A-7 Corsair II. The A-7 Corsair II might have been subsonic, but it was one of the most accurate strike aircraft of its generation. Built by LTV for the U.S. Navy, it was one of the first tactical jets to feature an integrated navigation and weapons delivery computer, essentially early precision bombing technology. It flew hard in Vietnam, and years later it was still dropping bombs in Desert Storm. Simple philosophy: find the target, hit the target, bring the pilot home. F-6 Intruder. If you needed something destroyed on a dark, stormy night deep in enemy territory, you called in the F-6 Intruder. Grumman's twin-engine attack jet was built entirely for all-weather, low-level precision bombing, equipped with the most advanced navigation systems of its time. It wasn't fast, it wasn't glamorous, but it could find targets that other jets couldn't even locate in daylight. The Intruder served the U.S. Navy for over 30 years, from Vietnam all the way through Desert Storm. The Harrier. The Harrier didn't just push boundaries, it shattered them. Developed by Hawker Siddeley in Britain, it became the world's first operational jet capable of vertical and short takeoff and landing, meaning it needed no traditional airbase whatsoever. It could lift off from a forest clearing, a ship deck, or a stretch of highway. That concept was genuinely revolutionary during the Cold War, and in the 1982 Falklands War, British Harriers proved it wasn't just a gimmick. They went to war and won. Blackburn Buccaneer. The Blackburn Buccaneer is one of the most underrated strike aircraft in aviation history. Designed for the Royal Navy to fly fast and low, beneath Soviet radar, it was built to deliver nuclear weapons if the Cold War ever turned hot. Its airframe was so tough and aerodynamically refined that it handled high-speed, low-altitude flight better than almost any jet of its era. The RAF loved it so much they kept flying it long after the Navy retired it, right up through the Gulf War in 1991. Sea Harrier. The Sea Harrier was the naval version of the Harrier, and it earned its reputation in the most dramatic way imaginable. Built to operate from small Royal Navy carriers, it was the only British fixed-wing fighter available when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands in 1982. Outnumbered, operating thousands of miles from home, Sea Harriers shot down 21 Argentine aircraft without a single air-to-air loss. That combat record alone is enough to cement its place in aviation history forever. Sepacat Jaguar. The Jaguar was that rare thing, a genuinely successful Anglo-French military project. Developed jointly by Britain and France, it was a supersonic light attack aircraft built for precision strikes and, if necessary, tactical nuclear delivery. A sophisticated nav attack system made it exceptionally accurate for its era, and both the RAF and French Air Force relied on it heavily. India loved it so much they licensed their own version and flew it well into the 21st century. MiG-21. The MiG-21 is the most produced supersonic jet in history, over 11,000 built, flown by more than 60 countries. Developed by the Soviet Mikhail-Gorbachev Bureau in the mid-1950s, it was fast, simple, cheap to build, and easy to maintain. Everything a Cold War Air Force could want. Its distinctive delta wing silhouette became one of the most recognized shapes in the sky over Vietnam, the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. Decades later, upgraded variants are still flying because some designs are just too good to retire. MiG-23. The MiG-23 was the Soviet Union's push into beyond visual range air combat, a significant leap from what came before. Its variable sweep wing allowed it to optimize performance across different speed regimes, and it carried a look-down, shoot-down radar paired with medium-range missiles. In practice, it was demanding to fly, and its combat record was uneven. But it was exported massively across the Warsaw Pact and Middle East, making it one of the numerically dominant Soviet fighters of the entire Cold War period. MiG-25. When NATO first spotted the MiG-25, it triggered genuine panic in Western intelligence circles. Here was a Soviet jet that could fly at Mach 3.2, faster than almost anything on Earth. The full truth only emerged in 1976, when a Soviet pilot defected to Japan with his aircraft, revealing it was built for speed and altitude, not dogfighting. But that didn't make it any less terrifying. As a high-speed interceptor and reconnaissance platform, the MiG-25 Foxbat was in a class completely of its own. MiG-27. The MiG-27 took the MiG-23's airframe and completely changed its purpose, from air combat to ground destruction. Redesigned with fixed engine intakes optimized for lower speeds, a laser rangefinder, and a fearsome multi-barrel cannon, it became a dedicated close air support and battlefield strike aircraft. The Soviet Air Force used it to hunt tanks and hit frontline targets. India was so impressed they licensed their own variant, the MiG-27 ML Bahadur, which served the Indian Air Force all the way until 2019. Su-17. The Su-17 Flagon is an aircraft most people have never heard of, but it was involved in one of the Cold War's most infamous incidents. Developed by Sukhoi as a high-speed interceptor for Soviet air defense, it was built to climb fast and kill enemy bombers before they reached their targets. On September 1, 1983, a Su-17 shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, a civilian Boeing 747, killing all 269 people on board. That single act made the Su-17 one of the most notorious aircraft in the history of aviation. Su-27. The Su-27 was a simple but effective idea. Take the aging Su-7 strike jet, add variable sweep wings, and transform it into something genuinely modern. The swing wing design dramatically improved low-speed handling and takeoff performance without sacrificing high-speed strike capability. It became a frontline Soviet ground attack aircraft through the Afghan War, where it flew thousands of combat missions. Exported widely as the Su-20 and Su-22, it served air forces across the Middle East, Africa, and South America for decades. Su-24. The Su-24 Fencer was the Soviet answer to America's F-111, a swing-wing, all-weather, deep-strike aircraft designed to fly low, fast, and far into enemy territory. With terrain-following radar and a massive weapons payload, it was built to hit NATO targets that other Soviet jets simply couldn't reach. It's been in near-constant combat since the Soviet-Afghan War, Chechnya, Syria, and most recently Ukraine, making it one of the longest-serving and most combat-experienced strike jets in history. Yak-28. The Yak-28 was one of the Soviet Union's most versatile jets and one of its least famous. Starting life as a supersonic tactical bomber, it branched into a whole family of variants covering interception, electronic warfare, and reconnaissance. The interceptor version, the Yak-28P, served Soviet air defense forces through the 1970s, while other variants handled jamming and intelligence gathering. It never got the glory of the MiGs, but the Yak-28 quietly covered multiple critical roles across the Soviet air order of battle. Dassault Mirage 3. France went their own way in fighter design, and the Mirage 3 proved it was absolutely the right call. A tailless delta-wing interceptor capable of Mach 2.2 gave France a fully independent supersonic air defense capability outside of NATO reliance. But its most legendary moment came in the Middle East when Israeli Mirage 3s tore through Arab air forces during the 1967 Six-Day War, destroying hundreds of aircraft in hours and achieving total air superiority. One war, one jet, one unforgettable performance. Dassault Mirage 5. The Mirage 5 was the Mirage 3 stripped down and sharpened specifically for ground attack. At Israel's request, Dassault simplified avionics, added fuel capacity, and increased the weapons payload for clear weather strike operations. Then, France embargoed the jets before Israel could take delivery, so the Israelis reverse-engineered it into the Kafir. The Mirage 5 still found a wide export market across Belgium, Pakistan, Peru, Colombia, and Africa, where its simplicity and solid performance made it a practical and popular choice. Dassault Mirage F1. After years of delta-wing designs, Dassault switched directions with the Mirage F1, adopting a conventional swept wing with a tail for the first time. The change paid off immediately: better low-speed handling, shorter takeoff rounds, more internal fuel, and a jet far more suited for the rough conditions of low-level strike missions. It became France's top export fighter through the 1970s and 1980s, serving in over a dozen air forces. Iraqi F1s flew hundreds of combat missions during the brutal Iran-Iraq War, proving the design's real-world toughness. Dassault Super Étendard. The Super Étendard was a small carrier jet that announced itself to the world in the most violent way possible. Built to operate from small Royal Navy carriers, it was the only French fixed-wing strike aircraft available when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands in 1982. Outnumbered, operating thousands of miles from home, Super Étendard shot down 21 Argentine aircraft without a single air-to-air loss. That combat record alone is enough to cement its place in aviation history forever. Saab 37. Sweden had a unique Cold War strategy: scatter the Air Force across the country so no single Soviet strike could wipe it out. The Saab 37 Viggen was built entirely around that doctrine. Its distinctive canard delta configuration gave it exceptional agility, and it could operate from dispersed bases, including public roads converted into runways. It came in dedicated variants for attack, interception, and reconnaissance, each optimized for a specific mission. The Viggen wasn't just a fighter, it was an entire defense strategy with wings. IAI Kafir. When France embargoed the Mirage 5 Israel had already paid for, Israel's response was remarkable. They built their own. The IAI Kafir took the Mirage 5 airframe, fitted it with an American GE J79 engine, and loaded it with Israeli-developed avionics and weapons systems. The result was a jet that was arguably better than the original it was based on. The Kafir served the Israeli Air Force through some of the most intense air combat of the 20th century and was later exported to Ecuador and Colombia. Atlas Cheetah. South Africa was hit with international arms embargoes during the apartheid era, but their air force still needed a capable fighter. The solution was the Atlas Cheetah, a deep upgrade to their aging Mirage 3s developed in close collaboration with Israel. New Canard foreplanes, modernized avionics, refueling probes, and updated weapon systems transformed the old Mirage into a genuinely competitive 1980s fighter. It was a masterclass in making the most of what you have when the world refuses to sell you what you need. Mitsubishi F1. The Mitsubishi F1 was Japan's first indigenous supersonic combat aircraft since World War II, and that fact alone made it historically significant. Built for close support and anti-ship strike missions around Japan's coastline, it was armed with a Mitsubishi ASM-1 anti-ship missile as its primary weapon. Visually, it resembled the Seppicat Jaguar, but it was an entirely independent Japanese design. The F1 proved that Japan had rebuilt a world-class aerospace industry and laid the foundation for every Japanese combat aircraft that came after it. Chengdu J-7. The J-7 started as a Chinese copy of the Soviet MiG-21 and evolved into something far more significant. After the Sino-Soviet split left China without Soviet technical support, Chinese engineers reverse-engineered the MiG-21 and spent decades refining it into increasingly capable domestic variants. Over the years, it became the absolute backbone of the People's Liberation Army Air Force and was exported widely as the F-7 to Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and across Africa. Some final variants featured avionics and weapons that went well beyond anything the original Soviet design ever carried. Shenyang J-8. While the J-7 was an adaptation, the J-8 was the Chinese first genuine attempt to design an original supersonic fighter from scratch, a larger, twin-engined interceptor developed by Shenyang Aircraft Corporation. It began development in the 1960s but didn't reach operational service until 1980, a timeline that reflects just how difficult it was to build a modern aerospace industry from the ground up. The upgraded J-8II added radar and improved weapons capability. It wasn't a world beater, but it was a critical milestone on China's road to aerospace independence. Nanchang Q-5. The Nanchang Q-5, export name A-5 Fanten, was China's first homegrown jet attack aircraft. Based on the J-6 airframe, it was significantly redesigned with a longer fuselage, side-mounted intakes, and an internal weapons bay to create a proper dedicated strike platform. It served the PLAF as a potential nuclear delivery aircraft and was exported to Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Sudan. Simple, affordable, and combat-capable, the Q-5 was exactly what China needed to build an independent strike aviation force. Hessa Psyche. The Hessa Psyche is Iran's attempt to field a domestically produced combat jet, and it's one of the most politically loaded aircraft in the world. Based on the American F-5 Tiger II, which Iran acquired before the 1979 revolution, Iranian engineers reverse-engineered and modified the design, adding a distinctive twin-tail configuration and domestic systems. Iran has prominently showcased the Psyche in military parades and air shows as a symbol of self-reliance under sanctions. Analysts debate how combat-capable it truly is, but as a statement of defiance, it speaks loudly. Soko J-22 Orao. The Soko J-22 Orao, Eagle in Serbian, was a joint Cold War project between Yugoslavia and Romania, built so both nations could field their own combat jet without depending on either the Soviet Union or the West. A twin-engined subsonic ground attack and reconnaissance aircraft, the Orao served both air forces through the 1980s. Yugoslavia's Oraos saw real combat during the brutal Yugoslav wars of the 1990s, flying strike missions in active conflict. It's a remarkable example of what smaller nations can achieve through smart collaboration and strategic determination. IAR-93 Vultur. The IAR-93 Vultur was Romania's contribution to that same joint program, and a symbol of Ceausescu's obsession with military independence from Moscow. Built using British Rolls-Royce Viper engines assembled under license, the Vultur was a subsonic ground attack jet that gave Romania a genuine indigenous air power capability during the Cold War. It was never a high-performance aircraft, and its development was slow and difficult. But for a nation determined to chart its own course inside the Eastern Bloc, the IAR-93 represented a real and meaningful achievement. Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. We end with a legend. The F-104 Starfighter was designed by Kelly Johnson at Lockheed's famous Skunk Works around one singular obsession: speed. With razor-thin wings barely large enough to see from certain angles and a screaming J79 engine, it could climb almost vertically and hit Mach 2 like it was effortless. It looked like a missile with a cockpit bolted on, because that's essentially what it was. Controversial, dangerous, and breathtakingly fast, the Starfighter captured the spirit of an entire era when speed was the only thing that mattered. And that is every third-generation fighter jet ever made. From carrier decks to frozen Soviet runways, from the jungles of Vietnam to the deserts of the Middle East, these jets defined an era. Flawed, dangerous, and absolutely magnificent. Drop a comment. Which one is your favorite? And if you want every fourth-generation fighter covered the same way, you already know what to do.